Hello, welcome back to Emerge, the health podcast for busy, high performing women. I'm your host, Dr. Alex Swenson Ridley. Today, I want to dive into something I've been thinking about and playing around with in my own life. And I know a lot of us experiment with, we'll just put it that way. This is a concept that's come up on a couple podcasts, just talking to, who I speak to on this show. We tend to be the busy type A high performers who are just go, go, go all the time and really suck at making time or taking time for ourselves and just push and push and push. And generally that leads to a crash. And I know I've been guilty of this for most of my life. And I'm sure many of you have struggled with this as well. And maybe, we're all in different places of how this works. And what I found really interesting, both in what I've been studying in my PhD program and just in like experimenting with in my own life in general, is finding ways to actually tune in to our body and using that as an indicator of what we should do that day in terms of exercise, in terms of how we treat ourselves, in terms of, you know, what we take on for the day. And part of this came from before I even started, actually took a biofeedback class, but before I started doing that, I had told my husband that what I wanted for either my Christmas or my birthday's Christmas Eve. So, one or the other, you get to pick, dear, but was an Aura ring. And if you're not familiar with these, I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes. But what it is, and, he looked at it and was like, isn't that just kind of like your watch? Because I have an Apple Watch too. And I was like, yeah, but no. And so what the Aura ring is that's different is, it's this ring. If you're watching this on video, I have it on my finger. It's not pretty. And sorry, ladies, it's not really attractive, but it has sensors in it and it measures things like your temperature and your heart rate and calculates heart rate variability, which is something that's very important. We're going to talk about in just a second. And then based on that, and it looks at how you sleep and how well you slept and how much, deep sleep you got in REM sleep and how often you were awake and what the total time in bed was, and looks at like lots and lots of data points that this puts in. And then based on all that, it actually gives you a readiness score for the day and calculates how active you should be based on how your body is functioning. And why I share this is, I was thinking about doing this episode and I'm like, most of us should be aware enough of ourselves to know like, hey, today's a day where I can, push myself harder and or not. But the reality is we're so disconnected that it's not. And since I got this ring, I've been utilizing it to, just paying attention to my readiness score for the day and getting curious about the things that affect that. Like travel was pretty rough on it. I'll not lie. Getting home at 4 a.m. didn't go so well. Found out I actually sleep on airplanes, but that's beside the point. Using it to really dictate and allow myself to be okay with whatever choices I make, especially around like physical exercise and activity, or just kind of taking it easy. And what I found is kind of unique because there's so many tools and things out there that you can use. You don't have to use the Aura ring, and I'll share a little bit more about it. I don't get anything for this. I'm enjoying using it. That's part of why I'm showing up talking about this. But like I have the Apple Watch too, and the Apple Watch will send me notifications like, hey, you didn't close all your rings. You got to close those rings, girl. You got to do it. And that may be well and good for some people, but for a lot of us who function in this world of high performance and not paying attention to ourselves and, putting everyone else first and all this stuff, we need the tools that aren't going to push us harder necessarily. They're going to make us pause and actually pay attention and start to listen to ourselves. So with all that, this might be a little bit of a shorter episode just in kind of bringing all this together. But the first thing I want to ask you is like, how connected are you to your body and what is going on with it? Like, how aware are you of things like your heart rate and your breathing rate and whether or not your temperature is fluctuating, which ladies, that happens with our menstrual cycle. So as we get closer to when we actually bleed, if you're still cycling, your temperature will elevate a little bit and then it comes back down after that. And as we approach ovulation, it'll go up again. You have these ebbs and flows with that. So if you're doing, natural flaming planning as a means of either preventing or getting pregnant, a great tool to have is, something like an Aura ring where you're not relying on a digital thermometer. It's just kind of calculating that stuff for you. Neither here nor there. What my point with all of this is like, how in tune are you really with your body? And are you utilizing tools that could be helpful, but are maybe pushing you too hard, too much, keeping that stress cycle that we always talk about on this show engaged so that you're, continuing to stress your body out in negative ways, in ways it doesn't need, and never actually giving yourself time to rest and recover. A lot of why this is coming up towards the end of the year, in our last group coaching call, I did an exercise with women in my program. A lot of them listen to the show. So ladies, if you missed it, there's a recording. But, we look at 7 different areas of life and just grade them basically. Look at how well are we doing in each of these areas. And there are things like nourishment and strength and resilience and, our perspective on life, all these different things. But one of them is rest. And how much rest are we getting? How much sleep are we getting? How how well do we build time for that into our lives? And literally every single person on the call, there were probably, I think, 10 of us that were live doing that. And same for me. Rest was the lowest thing. And I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? And so now I have this ring that tells me what days, like on the days that I need to just rest. And so I've just been really aware of, engaging with, okay, my body's telling me I need to rest today, and becoming more aware of what that feels like. Not like I have to rely on a piece of technology to indicate that for us, but at the same time, in this world of technology and busyness and advancement and all this stuff, a lot of us actually need the technology in order to tune ourselves back in. So what I want to kind of leave you with in this, and this whole idea and this whole concept is getting into what we call biofeedback. It's literally using parts of your biology and physiology to tune into your body. And then there's kind of 2 parts of it. So it's tuning into your body and understanding what's going on, and then making conscious changes to some of the things that happen unconsciously in our heads to impact that and make changes to your physiology. Hopefully that makes sense. So you're tuning in, and then you're bringing consciousness to the unconscious things like breathing, for example, that are going on, because we actually have some ways to control that with our thoughts and with different things that we can do. So some of you may have come across this concept. I know I was first introduced to it in physical therapy. And I went through physical therapy I've shared a little bit about on the show. I had a pelvic floor thing after having my son. I'd actually had vulvodynia for years up to that. And that's where, it just hurts all the time down there, ladies. Like there's a misfiring going on where the nerve endings in your vulva are just constantly on. And so, pain with intercourse, pain with urination, pain, like all the time pain. And I got over it enough and then had a baby, and it came back with the baby. And so my therapist trained me to use biofeedback, so tuning into the body and paying attention, and then rewiring the signals going to my brain. And a lot of that was working through some of the fear and stuff I had around pain, and then it would hurt. And so it was about taking back control and all this. And so we all have the ability to use some of these things, whether you're relying on a piece of, I'm not gonna lie, this ring is not cheap. It's like $300. Whether you're relying on a $300 piece of technology, it's about the same as the Apple Watch, right? Or you're just really making time to key into yourself. You can do this with deep breathing. So, one of the things I have started to learn and implement is taking really deep breaths, starting at the base of your spine at the sacrum, and gradually, like, just feeling that energy and that breath moving up your spine, all the way up and all the way up into the top of your head. And you might find some areas where it's stuck. I know I get this, like, I tend to be, because I'm a chiropractor, have some issues in the lower part of my neck. And so I'll feel like it's stuck, like the air doesn't want to go up. And so I keep doing it until it can come fully and naturally. And as you do that, you're going to change your heart rate, you change your breathing rate, you change, your brain physiology and the signals that it's sending out. So it actually starts to calm down and de-stress. All this stuff can help with things like pain or anxiety or, even depression. A lot of that stuff is if you just take the time to key in and tune into yourself and bring conscious awareness to what is going on inside, because our bodies are programmed to just, they keep us alive. Our heart beats, we breathe, our brain functions. We know when we have to go to the bathroom and when not. We know when we're hungry and when we're not. Hopefully, that's not being driven by emotions, but there are certain things that are just happening on autopilot. And the more we can tune into that, the more we can learn about ourselves and what we truly actually need in any given moment. And then we can work on how we provide that for ourselves. So hopefully this makes sense and just helps you start to think about all of this and really key in and tune into yourself. I'm becoming more and more interested in things like heart rate variability, for example. That's looking at averages of your heart rate through the course of the day, and basically, what's the gap and what's the difference. And the greater that is, actually, and so, the more flexibility your heart has, basically, like you're having moments of increase and moments of decrease, and it also matters what your resting heart rate is as well. But the greater that flexibility, the healthier you are, the better your body's responding to things like stress and life, and the better it's set to survive. And the lower that is, like, you're kind of just stuck in the cycle where maybe your heart rate's a little elevated and it just stays there. It never comes down. And so those are all things that, if we can learn this about ourselves sooner, before something bad happens, before we develop some sort of disease process from it, then we have the ability to start making changes in our lifestyle and in the things that we do each day that will have a bigger impact on our health and on our bodies than if we are to just go through life ignoring it, like so many of us do. So, like I said, I hope this serves you, just gives you some insight, inspiration. If you are using something like some of the technology that's out there, like the Apple Watch. I'm not saying the Apple Watch is a bad thing. I've had mine for years. I love it. I'm kind of, I have to have it on each day, and I got it for the health aspects of it, right? And so it measures things like your heart rate. I haven't seen it do actual heart rate variability before, but it doesn't adjust your goals and whatnot based on how your body's actually doing it. I just caution you, because I've been guilty of this, of pushing yourself too hard when you really actually need to rest. Because I know if I have something yelling at me like, hey, you need to move, you need to do this, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to go do it. Whereas a lot of times we actually need to say, like, no, actually, I really don't. Like, I need to chill today because I was up till 4 a.m. or whatever it was. And we will make far greater strides in our health tuning in that way, because it really allows our bodies to have those moments to actually de-stress, to actually deal with what it needs to deal with. And obviously, if you're constantly, running on empty, and you're like, for example, I have this readiness score thing, and like, for the most part, I average pretty good, and I'm like, my body's ready and I'm ready to go and all that. And there's been some days where I needed to just chill, especially around traveling. If you're averaging where you're always in that mode of needing to chill and you're always stressed and all that, that's where we start to have, look and need to make some impacts and changes in your life so that you can start to increase some of that stuff. It might be with sleep, it might be with, you know, when you're eating at night, it might be with stress, it could be with a lot of different things, but it gives you the insight and the information and keys into what you really need to focus on and look at, while also giving you the space mentally, I think, is my biggest thing with this. Why I like the Aura Ring over the Apple Watch, some of the other things I've seen out there, is, mentally, it's making that shift of say, like, really being honest about, hey, how's my body doing today? And helping me tune into that. And I think that's so important and so key, and something so many of us are missing as busy, high performing women. So I hope this helped serve you, and we will see you on Thursday with another awesome interview. And then I will be back next week.